This fella Ronaldo is a cod.
Arsene Wenger's been in Japan for a year. They don't know anything about English football.
I will love it if we beat them.
This is football heritage.
Con Giovanni, incredible. Dribble.
If you don't know the answer to that question, then I think you are an ostrich.
It's been a thoroughly entertaining start to the season. After 4 games, the Premier League table is a total mess, with only 5 points separating third place from the relegation zone. How this develops will be a fascinating watch over the coming weeks and months. Unfortunately, however, we must now put a pause to the season as we recommence qualification for Euro 2020 for the next 10 days. Hello and welcome to the Total Football Podcast. I'm your host, Declan Harte, and joining me as always is Andrew Conway.
Hello.
Andrew, why must they ruin our fun?
Well, it's only even small nations like Ireland that are ruining the fun of everybody else, because almost everyone of the big nations is qualified. Like, who isn't qualified are basically there already.
Yeah,
very
because
few.
of the Nations League, a bunch of them. I suppose Germany are technically there because they got relegated in the Nations League.
Yeah, but I reckon they'll be there by the end of this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, small nations like Germany are ruining this for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, when they say maybe we should, condense the season a bit more in some ways, and then make an international season in the end of May every year, I'm not necessarily against that. And have like a 3-week spell where everyone plays about 5 matches.
Yeah, I've long thought that was kind of the best way going forward, just to kind of adapt with the times, even just because of the way managers need more time with their teams to implement a way of playing football, because international football has fallen so far behind club football as a standard over the years that it kind of needs that as a way to kind of claw back.
Yeah, I think everyone would necessarily be in favour of it, because it doesn't impact on clubs, because if the players aren't on international duty, they're basically away on holiday, so nobody really cares. It keeps teams together longer, and there's less chance of, injuries coming about, and there's, less commercial. I think commercially it actually benefits there's less commercial interruption for the standard players, the likes of Sky or the likes of the Premier League clubs or the Champions League. But at the other side of it, I think UEFA and other international federations would benefit from having a condensed, every other day having proper match between proper opponents over a 2.5-week spell or 3-week spell, and having no competition whatsoever for their product. And in the way this is, you can ignore football for this week. And we're still, the way they try to do it by putting matches on every single day to guarantee the most amount of money for every team, it has allowed a lot of people to just ignore football where they couldn't ignore it previously, because it was so omnipresent for that 1 or 2 days in the international break that it would be on. Now it's on every night. People can just it's just small little matches that nobody really cares about, that everyone can just ignore flat out.
Yeah, I only ever find myself watching the Ireland matches now, which is what this move was supposed to not have people do. It was supposed to get people to try watch, I'll watch this nation and that nation, but I just find myself only really being motivated to watch Ireland matches at this point. Yeah.
There's a reason why they still put, and they do this in almost every sport I can think of globally, like in baseball or in basketball, in soccer, that they put multiple matches on at the same time, so that if you don't feel like watching one, you can watch another. For all the times where you're like, I wish I could watch this and this at the same time, there's multiple times when you don't want to watch any of the matches that are on at that particular time. That's why the likes of Sky only have a certain amount of matches on television at the weekend, as in they only have a certain amount of slots for matches. They would ideally have every match on, but they only have the lunchtime, the evening, and the Sunday afternoon. That's it.
Yeah, and then just with the actual matches that are coming up this week, none of them are particularly enticing. Like, Ireland are playing Switzerland, but that's just one of those matches that makes me feel depressed about the Irish national team more than anything. Like, the squad.
Why does it make you feel depressed?
The squad was announced, and just when you consider, Switzerland were at the World Cup, they got to a last 16, they're always at the Euros, they're always present.
Were they not in the Nations League finals?
Yeah, they just played in the Nations League finals. That's why they're kind of a few games behind us in the group, why we're able to sit at the top at the moment. But when you consider the fact that Ireland have just played, they got the good draw against Denmark. I'll give them that. That was a good 1-1 draw. The fact that it was a score draw helps, because away goals comes into account if the teams are level on points at the end of the match, or at the end of the group stages. But they've only played Gibraltar twice. They only beat them 2-0, whatever it was, or 3-0 on aggregate, I think, over those two games, which is pretty poor. They just about beat Georgia in a match where tennis balls were thrown onto the crowd, or thrown onto the pitch at one point. Like, it's been a bit of a mess. Like, the FAI are a constant mess as well, off the field. Mick McCarthy, like, I like Mick McCarthy, he seems like a good guy, but like, it just feels like we're waiting for Stephen Kenny to come in. We're waiting for a few youth players to come through. Troy Parrott at Tottenham, I suppose, is the big hope for Irish football at the moment, in the way that maybe Declan Rice was a few years ago, or Jack Grealish before it. And, well, Troy Parrott won't end up like those in the way that Troy Parrott's not going to end up playing for England. You know, he might not end up playing as well as we kind of hope he is, because, you know, we're still waiting for someone to replace Robbie Keane, really. And Roy Keane, maybe even to a lesser extent, and he's gone even longer, a lot longer. So Switzerland, like, there's bad history with Switzerland as well, especially with Mick McCarthy. It was 2005, was it, qualifying for the World Cup, that they I can't even remember what happened. I just remember that they did us. It was that long. It was a 2-1 defeat at Switzerland that stopped Ireland from being able to qualify for the World Cup in 2006. I can't quite remember. So there's that history there, and like they've got Premier League quality players. Like we might go on to talk about Granit Xhaka for maybe the wrong reasons, but like he still would walk into this Ireland team probably. Like that's the kind of state of affairs we got. So that's why it kind of depresses me, and I'm not really looking forward to this international break.
This fella Ronaldo is a cod.
But I mentioned Granit Xhaka there, and of course the North London Derby happened this week, and he was at the centre of attention for things once again.
Yeah, he has that weird anomaly in his character to come up with terrifically stupid decisions at just the right time, just like, you know, picking his nose against Watford. What was he doing other times? Remember? Oh God, he's done so much now at this point. He has the record for most penalties given away in his career.
Most errors leading to a goal in the Premier League since 2016, I think I saw as well.
Yeah, I think he's given away 7 penalties since the beginning of 2 seasons ago, I think. It's crazy when considering like most people score goals against Arsenal, they seldom save a penalty. But yeah, he made a pretty miserable effort at a sliding tackle, which was very far away from actually making any impact upon the game, and very far away from actually being the correct decision. Like, you learn at a very young age not to commit a sliding tackle at the best of times. Stay on your feet, don't go to ground, let alone in the box, let alone in a big derby, let alone when the player is already basically offloading the ball to somebody else and there's loads of players around you. There's so many mistakes that led to it. And it was
especially
very similar.
1-0 down as well and everything.
Yeah, when you know the game is still there to be played for, and as was shown in the second half, the game was, you know, very much to be played for. Why commit yourself in such a ludicrous fashion? But like, it was a completely bizarre mistake. And you even saw it that himself and Socrates, who made the mistake for the first goal, both players were so what would you say, apologetic after they made their terrible mistakes. Like, they both were head in hands, yelling at themselves, giving out at themselves, like showing that they knew that they did something wrong. And it begs the question of why do something wrong when you know it's wrong, and clearly both of them knew what they had done was wrong.
And the thing is with Arsenal as well, like you mentioned the Socrates for the first goal as well, and Xhaka for the second, obviously. But if that had been, say, like Ainsley Maitland-Niles for the first goal and Guendouzi for the second goal, you could at least like kind of look at it and go, okay, they haven't really made huge errors in leading the goals in games before. They're still young. They have time to learn. Arsenal came back from it in the end. It's not too bad. But like Socrates and Xhaka are two of the leaders of the dressing room. Xhaka in particular, like, is considered like a great leader for that side, and he considers himself.
He's
a
effectively
great leader.
Club captain.
Exactly. So like to see these two players make these mistakes, and it's not a once off for them either, especially Xhaka, as you mentioned. But like Socrates, I still don't understand what he was doing for that first goal, like running up, because like it's two Arsenal players go up for that header, and a Tottenham player wins it. I can't remember which Tottenham player it is, but a Tottenham
Harry Kane.
Harry Kane wins that header, and it goes to Lamela. And like a lot of people have blamed David Luiz for that goal, and like David Luiz isn't completely without blame in that scenario, but like it feels like people are kind of blaming David Luiz just because it's a bit easy to at the moment because of what happened last week at Liverpool.
Yeah,
But like Socrates goes up for that ball. If he doesn't go for that ball and just let Xhaka lose that 1-on-1, which can happen, fair enough, you don't really blame Xhaka for it. But if he doesn't go up for that header, Socrates is in position then for when Eriksen makes that run that ultimately leads to him being able to tap in the palmed away shot from Lamela. So, like, if he's not there, that stops the goal probably completely, I would say. Or he's able to kick it away, or he's able to even make just a tackle if Eriksen gets ahead of him. And it's just ridiculous. The
opportunity completely presented itself because Socrates ran in hot-blooded, all the blood in his head. Now, 10 minutes into the match, Arsenal are on top of it. They're creating pressure. They're putting the goalie under pressure, making him kick the ball long. If he gets his header on, suddenly there's another attack being created. There's a lot of opportunity for Arsenal. Maybe Arsenal can go do it. He's thinking this all in his head. He's already extrapolating the amazing goal that's going to be scored. Meanwhile, he's forgetting his essential responsibilities as a pro to do his job as a centre half, and he didn't do that at all. Xhaka it's his job to try and win those headers against Harry Kane. Harry Kane's a better header of the ball. He's going to win 90% of those challenges, probably with Granit Xhaka. So it's Socrates' job to be behind there, holding the shape of the team together, and winning the next ball, whether that's at Lamela or whether it goes to Son or Eriksen or whoever else is in the Spurs attack at that point. He did none of that. He went right into it, causing a whole disarray into the defence. Socrates is the fast Arsenal centre half. David Luiz is not, so that means David Luiz suddenly has to run fast, which is not something he does very well. And people can blame him, but he didn't have a lot of space to run into, or he didn't have a lot of options there. He was suddenly marking the whole central area of the pitch was suddenly his to mark, and he can't really deal with everything at once. Ainsley Maitland-Niles runs to cover for the two players that are obviously he knows are slower than him, leaving that gap out the right hand side for Eriksen to tap in the goal after Bernd Leno makes a silly mistake of not effectively palming a fairly tame shot from Eric Lamela away into Eriksen's path. It was silly altogether. And
it's just such a hammer blow then for Arsenal, because going into this match they had the momentum, which is weird to say considering they lost the weekend before, but you lose to Liverpool, you can put that aside at this stage because of how good Liverpool are. But Tottenham had lost at that weekend as well to Newcastle at home, a much more embarrassing kind of defeat. There's talks of Mauricio Pochettino quitting after this match, which is ridiculous. I don't think anyone really expected that to happen, but there were talks of it, which is saying something. He's fallen out with Christian Eriksen. There's the whole situation with Jan Vertonghen that no one really understands what's going on there. And both of them were put into the side for this match, which was a little interesting as well, as an aside. But Arsenal actually had the momentum going into the North London Derby, which I feel is rare over the last few years as well. And to just concede two such cheap goals is so detrimental to their forward momentum and the sense and the feeling that they are the superior team in North London, that they can get top four this year. Sure, it was a good fight back, but at the end, it was 2-2 draw. Who really is happy with this 2-2 draw?
Well, from no one really wanted that result, especially it kind of ruins Tottenham's confidence from taking a 2-0 lead away from home against one of the big sides, especially in a derby match, and it kind of it leaves a sour taste in Arsenal's mouth, because if you're going to draw a match, it's the best way to draw a match is from 2-0 down. But at the same time, you're they could have won it, or if they hadn't made the stupid mistakes that led to the first two goals, they could have easily ran away with it. Given that Arsenal are trying to do something different at the moment, and this was the first real test of that new system that Unai Emery is trying to implement, this 4-3-3 system with the three strikers, with Pepe, Lacazette and Aubameyang up front, and having a platform built before them to kind of be more solid defensively. This was a terrible trial for it, and if it had gone well, maybe that was a platform they could have built on for the rest of the season and gone with some moderate success into a top four finish. But now, it's kind of, they're going to have to start again at the next match after the international break, and that's a long time, and a long time to stew on that result, when really they could be up, celebrating the fact that they have a new way of playing, and then they beat one of the rivals, which is also a very important thing for Arsenal, considering how bad the record is against their other top six rivals, that these home matches are things they have to get results in to actually stand a chance come the end of the season.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the front three as well, because we talked about them last week, Liverpool, because I was kind of perplexed that Lacazette didn't play. I think he might have had an injury, which might have been why he didn't start. And
he had to come off as well with that same injury. It's a flare-up, I think, that happens more and more with the guy.
But like watching Arsenal last season, I remember when Aubameyang came in, I thought it was a bit of a weird signing because they had, like I said, it seemed needless to spend that much money on someone. Like obviously, like Aubameyang is quality, he scored a lot of goals for Arsenal, but I just never felt like Lacazette and Aubameyang mesh that well together, unless you want to play two up front, which Emery doesn't seem to want to do very often. And then to just throw Pepe into the mix and make it a front three, like it seems like they're trying to replicate Liverpool's front three, but it remains to be seen whether Lacazette can play that Firmino role as well as Firmino can, and then Aubameyang on the left, it just seems like a waste of his ability to kind of get in the box and poach goals.
Yeah, like I see where you're coming from with that analysis. Like I feel that this is definitely a club made decision and Aubameyang, of course, feels like a very opportunistic signing. As he was available at a reasonable amount for a striker of his calibre, 20 plus goals a season striker in this market. He was available in a time where Arsenal needed something, and they got him, and he's done well enough for them. Lacazette seemed to have been more of a long-term target, so signing the two of them was like, oh well, it's better than not signing one of them and them going to one of your close rivals, which was a possibility for Aubameyang. Could have easily gone to Spurs. Whether that would have been better for him in the long term or not, who knows. But he's at Arsenal, he's doing well at Arsenal. I know what you mean about the tactical switch they've made to try and make him more like Liverpool, and I think Emery, that's the kind of football he wants to play with this team that he has. I think he was striving for that last season, but didn't actually have the players really to get there in terms, and he couldn't get a settled midfield that he wanted, and I still don't think he has the players he needs in midfield to give the adequate platform to make that formation a success. But he's going to give it a go, because it's all, I think playing the three players at the same time is better than dropping one of them when you have that kind of skill and guile on the bench that of either Lacazette or Aubameyang. Sure, I don't think Lacazette can play that Firmino false nine role really at all. I don't think it's in his nature, but there's other options available to Arsenal to try and substitute for that false line. You could have a dedicated playmaker on the pitch, the likes of Tobias or Ozil or Mkhitaryan for that matter, but you do lose something in defence by playing any of those three players. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes with it in the near future, and maybe it could be quite exciting. It could be more dynamic than say Liverpool's, which is a very functional style of football. No matter how entertaining it is still very functional, so it could be something more exciting than that, although it probably won't be as successful as that.
And then Liverpool won 3-0 this weekend against Burnley. Man City won 4-0 against Brighton. Feels like there's not even really much to say about that other than they won again.
Well, like there's a few things, like there was the ridiculous goal from Trent Alexander-Arnold. I know it took a little chip off Chris Wood's back, I think.
Yeah, I think it went down as an own goal.
It did go down as an own goal, which if you see the interview with Jurgen Klopp on Sky Sports, he was flabbergasted and angry, really just angry that was given as a... I think he was certain it was a Trent Alexander goal. It was still like, I don't think he thinks the trajectory was that far changed. I think it kind of fooled the keeper by, if nothing else.
He seemed a little perplexed that that decision was even thought of to be made as well.
Yeah, because I think it was just a high looping cross, and the keeper probably just got dumbfounded by the way it moved and the fact that Chris Wood was kind of in the way of the ball. I think it was just not a mistake by the goalkeeper, but certainly he was lost for it. He should have done a bit better in the situation. He should have been maybe a bit more cognizant of where the ball was at the moment rather than where it was actually going to end up, which is something a lot of goalkeepers try and think that they can anticipate where the ball will go, and they often end up forgetting where the ball is actually going to go. Like David De Gea, I know, did it last week against Crystal Palace with the winning goal, the winning goal in that match. So even the best keepers can make that mistake. Other than that, I know Mo Salah and there's a little talk to be had about Mo Salah and Sadio Mane. It's a bit of there's a rivalry there between those two players who were last season competed for the Golden Boot and finished, I think, level on goals last season. And if you remember last season, Mo Salah gave an interview after one of the matches. I think the Chelsea match, was it Chelsea?
Oh, I don't know.
It was a Chelsea away from home last season where he hit the amazing goal from outside the box.
Oh yeah,
corner.
That was Chelsea.
Yeah, at home to Chelsea. There after that match, Salah was actually giving the post match. Kind of, I think he got man of the match or something. He was giving the interview anyway post match, and he made a comment about maybe you should look, because they were like, oh, you're scoring more goals now. It's like, is it better to have that rivalry with the other players, the other Firmino and Mane? And he said, maybe those other players score more because I give a bit more beforehand. He was getting more assists last season than, say, Mane was. And that was a kind of a weird thing to say, given that you just won a tough match and you're still going for the league title, and to kind of undermine your friendship and teammates like that. And I feel it's a bit like that now, because I noticed because I was looking for this, I rewatched the highlights to it, and I was looking for when Firmino passed the ball to Mane for the second goal. There was no, Firmino and Mane ran off celebrating, and the rest of the Liverpool team, and Salah was slow to celebrate with him. And it was the same for the other side of the goals, when the players were slow to celebrate with each other, and you might think, well, maybe there is something rocky in that relationship. And it's unfortunate, because it seems to happen to a lot of teams that when things are going too well, something has to happen to undermine that team doing well. Like relationships break down in the side, or the manager falls out with one of the best players, and you can see this. Maybe this is what's materialising at Liverpool, that the best couldn't just sustain, it couldn't just keep on going. That it has to implode at some point, and it seems to be slowly coming apart. We'll see whether before Christmas now, whether the same type of thing continues, or whether they'll kiss and make up in the next match. I don't know. I wouldn't be so sure.
Yeah, the only thing about that is I'd say I just trust Klopp to kind of get that right, I suppose, more than I would maybe other managers in the league, or managers that have been in the league.
Yeah.
But then the Champions League draw took place last Thursday. Nothing too exciting. I suppose Chelsea against Ajax for the first time will be interesting. Bayern Tottenham, I suppose, will be fun to watch. But ultimately it feels like it's all just a side dressing, I suppose.
Salad dressing.
Salad dressing. It's a real salad dressing. It's a side dressing before kind of everything gets going in February, really.
It's not the most exciting group up, although the Sparta Prague, was it Sparta Prague?
Sparta, yeah.
Or Slavia Prague?
Slavia, yeah.
That had the funny game. They got...
oh, yes, in Group F, they were put in with Barcelona, Dortmund and Inter Milan. They just laughed.
Laughing away at it. And they're not a club that, certain smaller clubs would love to get, when the Nicosia were in it or something like that. They'd love to get those big away games around Madrid or Barcelona for, the atmosphere, for the event, for the experience. But, Slavia Prague are a big enough side not to care about getting Barcelona. They'd happily take the weakest group and get through to the knockout stages, but they're we're not even going to get Europa League this year.
At worst they were probably hoping to get a handy Europa League place. There's little chance of that happening now.
It does, unless you never know, maybe one of these big teams can end up a surprise, but there's no big you say Chelsea, Ajax. I don't like this Ajax team. I think for an Ajax team that is traditionally in transition, they are certainly in transition again. They lost not all of their great players from last season, but certainly 3 or 4 of them, including some of their more experienced players, which is a bit unfortunate for them.
It's more the freshness of that matchup, just because they've never played each other in a competitive match before.
It is a bit bizarre that's never happened.
Yeah, I kind of get why it never happened, because Chelsea really weren't, in the 70s, Chelsea weren't off winning the league and getting into Europe much, so when Ajax were off winning the European Cup. So I get how it's never happened before. I suppose maybe in the last 10-15 years it's a little strange that they've never met, but I suppose that can just happen. So it'll be interesting. That group is a little kind of open, just because Chelsea are one of the bigger clubs that's also in transition.
They're number 1 seed.
Valencia and who's the 4th team in that group as well?
Oh, I don't know.
Lille? Is it Lille?
Team who is, they've managed to hold together most of their best players, but they're still not as strong as they were last season, finishing 2nd in France. But the Chelsea side, not to go rolling back too much on the weekend, but they gave away 2 leads against Sheffield United very late on as well. They couldn't cope with the pressure at home to no offence intended, but a smaller team who I know was a bit innovative with their style, and Chelsea did not know how to cope with that, with defenders overlapping on the wings and stuff like that. Chelsea were very slow to adapt to that kind of that type of tactic, and Frank Lampard was again very upset at his Chelsea players, not necessarily the opposition, after the match finished, and was very just kind of down on the team, and I wonder how long that can continue. Yeah,
what really struck me about Frank Lampard is that he said in his post-match interview that in the first half he could see it coming, but isn't his job to stop it happening if he can see it coming? So that just seems like an admission of poor performance from him as a manager in the match as well.
He's very harsh on himself. It reminds me of Stephen Gerrard in his playing career. Remember that Stephen Gerrard book where he was like over-analysing every single moment of his career of how bad he was in those moments, even though he wasn't really. He was just being very harsh. And maybe that's what's happened to Frank Lampard in his managerial career. He's been harsh on every single moment that he has the team, but yet not doing anything to kind of rectify those moments, or not doing anything to speak about them, really. It's a funny situation. There's one other thing, we bring it back to the Premier League for 1 second. Did you see the end of the Aston Villa versus whatchamacallem team?
Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace.
Yeah,
Did you see the end of that match?
Kevin Friend, the referee, not giving not allowing the goal to stand against
disallowing a Henry Lansbury goal in the 90th plus minute, and giving it as a dive against Jack Grealish. When Jack Grealish was fouled twice, probably one of them was a penalty.
Yeah, like I heard, I actually didn't see this live. I heard a bunch of people talking about it, including yourself, over the weekend. I was like, I have to go see this incident. It can't be as bad as people are making it out to be. And it was like actually maybe worse. Like my first question is like, okay, sure, the reason why the goal couldn't stand, I can kind of understand, is that the whistle was blown before. The whistle was blown
when the ball was going past the keeper into the net.
See, I think. I looked back and it sounded like the whistle had gone before the shot was struck. But like again, that's marginal. That's at Kevin Friend a fault. He should have let the play continue until it came to a resolution, or at the very least the shot was taken, whether it went in or not. So like that's a fault of him. Then it felt like why wasn't VAR there to give a penalty if it was a foul, like overturn the yellow card to give a penalty?
They're not allowed to overrule the referee. Final says with referee.
But it seemed like it was a clear and obvious mistake that could be changed. So I just don't understand why that wasn't even really looked at.
It's like clear and obvious omission is almost the state of play with VAR at the moment. It's not a clear and obvious overruling. Like, I've not seen something overruled yet, and I'd be interested to see whether there will be an overruling made this season, because maybe it's not necessarily in their remit not to overrule, but I think it might be in their tacit instructions. Don't do this, because like, I hope Jack Grealish gets the yellow card rescinded, because like at the very least, like it was a great run from Bright Shalom into the box. He got fouled once and he kept on his feet, and then he got fouled again. I think Zaha fouled him first time, and I think Gary Cahill fouled him the second time, and he hit the deck, but he'd already offloaded the ball and he popped right back up. There was no notion of a dive. The only thing he did was kind of shield himself while hitting the ground. It was just a bizarre decision. And Kevin Friend, having sent off an Aston Villa player as well earlier in the match, it was a strange thing. I wonder will he be demoted for the next phase of domestic football.
Yeah, like it's such a pity as well to see a match that seemed like it was a good match for those involved. It was a good result for Crystal Palace, but it's just completely taking the wind out of the sails of that result, and it feels so harsh on Villa, a side just back up in the Premier League after a couple of years out as well. That they had a good result the week prior as well, that they are just completely taken aback then because of this terrible refereeing decision that's completely out of their hands.
It's the history of the Tottenham. We believe in the history.
There's been 5-4s, 4-4s, 3-3s, 3-2s, back-to-back 5-2s. There's been last-minute goals, penalties, penalty saves, controversial offside decisions, red cards, and of course, handbags thrown in for good measure. Over the years, the North London Derby has had it all. What is it about the rivalry that makes it so special and makes it stand out above the rest in the Premier League?
It is a very strange one. We don't know why, say, Liverpool, Manchester United, Man City, Everton, Liverpool, Norwich, Ipswich maybe is the closest rival it has in a derby in England. Certainly, even Aston Villa, Birmingham, it's kind of become a farce. Really, it's more of a mean tempered than it is an actual quality match. There is something about the North London Derby that has persisted through the years. There was a long time there where Spurs didn't win. They didn't win for 18 years or something like that away from home, I think. Against Arsenal, they still have only won 2 of the last 30 matches away to Arsenal. They have won a few more at home, but there's something of a mental block there for Spurs no matter how well they play. And on the other side, like, it's a cliche, but form does go out of the window whenever these two teams play, no matter what position they're in the league. They could, like, Arsenal could be doing terribly and Spurs could be doing great, or vice versa, and they just play out a cracker of a match that you can't really predict beforehand. Like, a lot of people beforehand, I think Paul Merson got like chastised at the weekend for saying Arsenal win easily 4-1, and you know, it could have easily happened like that, but it didn't. It finished 2-2, but you know, that was the form pick beforehand, that Arsenal, despite losing to Liverpool last week, looked better in the early part of the season, had more of their team together, had a side of play, while Spurs were disintegrating to a lesser extent, losing players wanting to leave the club before the end of the window, Pochettino talking about leaving the club in general. You know, the same old Spurs stuff was happening, and yet it comes to the match, Spurs take a 2-goal lead, look comfortable, and Arsenal bounce back and make it an entertaining second half with 2 goals. It makes no sense why it's so entertaining, because very few derbies actually are when they have emotional, you know, have emotions in them. Like the emotions in the North London derby seem to just add to the occasion and seem to make players who are generally not up for making mistakes, like say Socrates, or players who are up for making mistakes like Granit Xhaka, make mistakes in matches. It is something special about the whole occasion. Like Harry Kane loves it. I think he's scored 8 or 9 goals in North London derbies now. He's already getting right up there near double figures.
I think he's the record scorer actually already in the North London derby.
Lacazette has a bunch of goals now against Spurs as well. He seems to score. You know, a lot of players score their first goal. Like Torreira last season scored his first goal for Arsenal against Spurs, and you know, it seems to mean a lot to the players, despite it being a relatively, like, it's a derby. It's not say as light as Liverpool Everton is. There is a bit of dislike between the two teams. I know Jack Pitbrook in The Athletic last week wrote that piece about the foundation of Arsenal as a North London club, and how it really annoyed Spurs at the time, and that annoyance continued through generations that have passed since. But you know, there is something there that the teams, there's an animosity. They don't like each other, and they've held that kind of hatred throughout the years, throughout good times and bad times for both clubs.
Yeah, like I think what's really interesting is the fact that, like, you could in a lot of times when like certain rivalries get really good, it tends to become because the fact that, well, the two managers have two different play styles that clash against each other. But with this rivalry, you can go back to Martin Jol in charge of Tottenham and the mad 5-4 match where Tottenham that was at White Hart Lane, and Arsene Wenger, of course, is in charge of Arsenal. And then you bring in Harry Redknapp in the 4-4 draw in one of his first games at Tottenham, and still Arsene Wenger is still in charge. But now we've got Unai Emery in and Pochettino in at Tottenham, and those matches, like, the matches are still electrifying. Last season, the 4-2 result for Arsenal at the Emirates was probably the game of the season last year, and that was Emery's first North London derby. This is his third one now. They didn't play in the cups last year, did they?
No,
this is his third North London derby, his second at home, and it was still, like, when we built it up last week, we said this could be a really good game, and it ended up being a really entertaining match. So it's really interesting that, like, through the years, through the managers, through the players, because, like, none of the players that played in the 5-4 of 15 years ago are even playing football anymore, let alone playing for Arsenal or Tottenham.
Was that 15 years ago?
Yeah, it was I think it was November 2004. I know, it feels like a
that
long time
was
ago.
the first game Spurs won in a very long time against Arsenal. I remember it at the time. It would have been years and years and years since Spurs had actually beaten Arsenal in a match, and that was a huge deal at the time. And then, yeah, there's history. Like, very, very seldom do players go between the two clubs. Like Sol Campbell famously was called Judas and left Spurs on a free transfer. The first of those kind of
Bosman.
Daniel Levy, that's what kind of scarred Daniel Levy against selling players. After Sol Campbell, he vowed never to sell a player for less than what they're worth, or let them rot. That kind of notion he has, and that's why he's been such a hard nugget ever since, and been such a tough person to read when it comes to transfers. Much to the distaste of many managers, including Harry Redknapp and Mauricio Pochettino. But, you know, David Bentley, I remember he scored in that 4-4. I think he scored the equaliser in that 4-4 draw.
An incredible goal as well. A goal that really is the highlight of his career at this point, I would say.
Yeah,
like, it was...
and he was an Arsenal youth player. Like, he scored a great goal for Arsenal when he was, I think, in the FA Cup in 2005 2004 or 2005. I think he was technically part of the Invincibles, even though he mightn't have got a medal. He was technically in the greater squad at Arsenal at that time.
And then what was it? It was Jermaine Defoe, I think, scored a late equaliser in that. Like it was like I think they were 4-2 down in that, and they came back 4-4 very late on.
Yeah.
And like that's the kind of result that gave Harry Redknapp that bit of momentum, because like Tottenham were terrible at the time. They were like, because Juande Ramos, I think, was the manager that had just left. They'd won the League Cup the year before, I think it was, but they were down in the relegation zone. There was the joke of it was to do with the triangle having 3 points and Tottenham only having 2. I can't remember what the setup was, but like there were jokes about a triangle having more points than Tottenham, that kind of stuff. So like Tottenham were in a bad place, and that was a big result for them. And like that I feel like was what really started this rivalry in like consistently being able to get good performances out of. Like I remember a couple of years later, then Tottenham went 2-0 up at the Emirates and then capitulated and lost 5-2, and then they did it again the next time they came to the Emirates. Yeah. I think Emmanuel Adebayor, who one of those few players who played for both sides, I think Emmanuel Adebayor got sent off in one of those matches as well for Tottenham. Like it was a crazy sequence of events that led to those 2 games happening.
Yeah, and it's like, and to bring it back to your original point, I still don't understand what's so special about it in terms of what elevates it above. Like Boca and River Plate in South America, or Celtic Rangers, they do not produce consistently as good matches over the past 10 years as Arsenal against Spurs has. And it doesn't make any sense, because like it's not like they're polar opposites in style. They don't play completely different football. They're both kind of front foot playing teams, but neither team has unstoppable defences. Neither team has, is filled with world-class players. They both have a bunch of good players, but like, why is such top-notch football happening all the time? Or why are suddenly players who are good 90% of the time get filled with this anguish and anxiety to perform badly during these matches to gift goals to other players? And then there's some times there's inspiration. Look at Guendouzi's amazing through ball for the equalising goal against Spurs for Aubameyang. Like, where did that come from a player who's mostly kind of a workman, water carrier type of midfielder? He's suddenly producing a sublime piece of skill that he won't do probably for the rest of the season.
And like, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that like for a long time Arsenal fans had that St. Totteringham's Day that they would celebrate, where the day that they clinched the fact that they would finish the season above Tottenham. Like, you don't see that in rivalries with other teams. Like, you wouldn't see that between the Manchester clubs or the Liverpool or the Liverpool and Everton, or even Liverpool and Manchester United. Even like that's not something you see brought up much at all. Like the actual like fan rivalry is very apparent with this in a way that isn't with a lot of the other Premier League ones. Maybe you get it with Norwich and Ipswich or Birmingham and Aston Villa you mentioned earlier, but I think with the rivalries between clubs that are actually in the Premier League, you don't really see it as much off the field between fans, but in a respectful manner as well. Like, it's never like there's never violence, there's never anything that really makes an edgy affair in the way that you might see with a few other rivalries across. Like Millwall are the obvious ones to kind of throw out. Like Millwall against West Ham, you'd be kind of wary if they were drawn against each other in a cup match. But if Tottenham drew Arsenal in the FA Cup, which has happened over the years, you'd be like, oh great, we get another one of these, and the fans would be well up for it. There'd be a good atmosphere, probably be put on during the night, and be a good occasion. Which everyone could celebrate. Like, as a neutral, it's very good to watch these matches because you can respect the rivalry and enjoy what's happening on the pitch at the same time, and we don't really have that at the top level in England.
No, so what you're saying is basically it's a friendly rivalry with just about enough edge so that there's a bit of bite in it.
Yeah, like Arsenal and Tottenham fans clearly don't get on. Like the Arsenal fans like winding up Tottenham fans and vice versa, but there's no real animosity there where like someone's going to start a riot if there's a result. Yet. Yeah, not yet. Hopefully it doesn't escalate to that. Because we might enjoy maybe the players getting into a bit of a tussle, but we wouldn't want that spilling out into the crowd or anything.
Too true.
But it's interesting to see how long this can last as well, because like obviously like we've spoken before about the Manchester United Liverpool rivalry, which is famously bad or infamously bad at this point. Between any time they play is just really boring. They play out so many nil draws or slow, boring 1-0 wins for someone or a 1-1 draw. Yeah. And they're the two teams with the most trophies in England, especially in the first division. There was the whole thing where Ferguson wanted to knock Liverpool off their perch and stuff like that. And there is clearly animosity between the fans there and the two cities as well, going back to the whole stuff with the bridge, or not the bridge, the seaport back in the early 19th century or something, or early 20th century. There is clear animosity there, but the matches that those two teams produce, even going back to Ferguson and the various Liverpool managers he fought against, none of them produced classic matches. Various Man United managers that they've gone through over the few years, the Klopp's been there now, they've still not produced any great matches. So it is weird that while those two teams are generally at the top level of English football, they don't produce good matches, whereas Tottenham and Arsenal are generally at the top end of the English pyramid, but they consistently do produce good matches. So it is weird that dynamic exists.
Yeah, it is very, very strange. And the only thing I can think of is what we said. It has a bit of an edge to it, despite it being relatively friendly. And maybe these other derbies just have too much of a good thing. Maybe Everton, Liverpool are too friendly with each other. Maybe Man United, Liverpool are too hard on each other that they can't. There is an anxiety and a hatred built up by the fan bases that make the players not able to perform to the standards that they should be. Because very similarly, a lot of derbies, and it is, again, to bring back the cliche, form is thrown out the window in a lot of these cases, but consistently it's form for good football is thrown out the window. It's not as much form for this team is definitely going to batter this other team because they're better players. It's just it descends into nonsense. It descends into this anxious kind of football that is being played, that nobody wants to make a mistake. Yet for the North London derby, multiple players are making multiple mistakes yesterday, and no one really cared. They kind of got angry at the time, but it's all forgotten. And it's not going to be brought up in 3-4 weeks' time the way that if Marcus Rashford had punched the ball off the line, that he would have got hate mail from Liverpool fans, for making such a gesture. In 3 or 4 weeks, no one will remember Granit Xhaka made a stupid tackle in the box and gave away a penalty. No one will remember Socrates going for that header and giving away a goal. No one will remember the kind of, I don't know what any of the Spurs players did, just not play very well. No one will remember Christian Eriksen went the kind of anonymous for 70 minutes of that match following scoring a goal.
Yeah, and then there's over the years, then the Manchester derby has had a few good matches. There's the 4-3 with Michael Owen scoring the late winner. There's the 3-2 where Man United came back and denied City the title. There's the 6-1 where City absolutely destroyed Manchester United. But then there's matches there was a 0-0 when Van Gaal and Pellegrini were in charge at both clubs, and it's just droll and boring. I don't think either team really had a shot on target in that match.
There still isn't that demonising hatred between the clubs. That it's a derby that's existed for many years without anyone really caring about it. Alex Ferguson, maybe he was doing it to wind up the Man City fans, but he never considered Man City a rival to him, and as a result, he never treated the match with much respect.
Yeah, the Noisy Neighbours, I think, was kind of the pinnacle of that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of it's continued in Manchester United's viewpoint that they're not really, it's not really a big derby between them, and Man City have kind of, because they were so far behind for so long, it's still a novelty for when they are better than Manchester United for the moment anyway. That it's just an expectation that they're better, and it doesn't have that kind of risk attached to it that they're going to lose and it matter, while because they lost them for so long and they always are far behind for them for so long. But when Spurs and Arsenal, if they beat each other or lose against each other, it matters, because it's for the next 6 months or until they play each other again. That is the kind of thing you can hold over your next door neighbour who might be an Arsenal fan, or your next door neighbour might be a Spurs fan.
I really hope that this does continue, because it does. We don't know how long Pochettino will be at Tottenham or Emery will be at Arsenal, so we hope that this can continue through the various managers, and that these players can remember that they are part of this kind of unique history in English football. Almost
for the sake of the league, they need to throw their common sense out the window before every one of these matches.
Because in Spain, obviously there's the Clásico, and sometimes that does produce poor matches. But you build up. There are two big matches you look forward to every year, and the North London derby is as close to the Clásico as we're kind of getting in England at the moment.
Yeah,
So
most definitely.
We need that tradition to continue.
Hopefully.
Unfortunately, as we started with the show, there's no club football for us next week to talk about. We'll be back next Monday, of course. We'll review whatever international news pops up. The transfer window closes today as recording. We'll talk about a few of that. And
PSG have signed a bunch of players.
Yeah,
congratulations to them.
We might even talk about the European leagues and how they're going after a while, because we've kind of just been waiting for the transfer window to close, or at least that's kind of in my viewpoint, because who knows? Like, I saw PSG did a swap deal with Real Madrid for Keylor Navas and Areola, which I thought was random and out of nowhere, but maybe I've just not been keeping up with the transfer deals as much, or the Cardi off PSG.
Is it Lucas Zidane loses out in that? That's Zidane's son.
Yeah,
because it was presumed he was going to be number 2, but now Areola's coming in, and he will be a challenger to Courtois as number 1 goalie. And
he has been very interesting so far this season, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that can kind of develop. Atletico Madrid, I think, at top of the league. I think they're the only side with 100% win record, if I'm not mistaken.
But Messi's back.
Barcelona are playing the kids again at last. One of them scored during the weekend, so we'll have that to talk about next week, and we'll have club football to preview next week at the very least. But thank you for being here, Andrew.
Thank you for having me, Declan.
And thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, then don't forget you can tell family and friends about the show. Spread the word of the Total Football Takeover. You can also follow us on social media at the TF Pod on Twitter and Total Football Pod on Instagram. We can also be found on podcast services including Spotify by searching Total Football Podcast. The more the merrier. That's what we always say.